So my wife asked me the other day if she needs to be afraid for her life when she sleeps. I asked her if she trusts me. I said, 'cause I trust you. And it makes me a bit worried that you're asking me that question. It reminds me that sometimes when people are thinking about doing something or are already engaging in that behavior, they sometimes start to ask their partner if they're doing it instead, such as cheating. I don't know exactly what it can mean though when she's asking if you want to kill her in her sleep. Needless to say, I started to consider whether I should be sleeping next to this person. She didn't like the way I applied my logic to her question, but it got me to thinking what could make someone ask something like that. And I realized that she's probably starting to get a bit afraid of the way I was acting. It was just letting me know she was getting nervous around me. I guess that's what it means anyways, because otherwise maybe my wife wants to off me in my sleep and is afraid I'm thinking of doing it first. Fear not though, I'm not going to hurt my wife in her sleep. So as I considered her question and the ramifications of what it could mean, I started to wonder, what does society consider as an acceptable reason to take someone out for? I thought about this to try to understand the meaning behind her question. I was probably reaching a bit here, but maybe, if I could figure out the socially acceptable reasons to take someone out first, maybe I could offer her some solace to my wife by explaining how she didn't qualify under any of those standards. So I set to work on my thoughts. What's a socially acceptable reason to take someone out? First is easy, the old classic an eye for an eye stance. Many people are on death row for taking another life. So that's one way lots of societies accept the rationale to take a life. The second is in self-defense of yourself and those closest to you. As an example, a guy breaks in your house in the middle of the night, and you wake up with him standing in the corner of your room. Imagine you have a gun in your nightstand, and you take it out and blast a hole in that bitch. Hopefully it's not your wife having gotten up to take a piss in the middle of the night, but hey, mistakes happen. I don't keep I don't keep guns in my house though, so that scenario is far-fetched for me at least. What else is a socially acceptable reason to take someone out? Violent rape, especially if inflicted upon children. While the law might not mandate a death penalty for such a predator, I think most men would consider it a suitable resolution if they walked into their house and found someone having their way with their wife or kids. I'm sure if we keep at this subject, we can find even more potential candidates for being socially acceptable to take the perp out. So my mind stirs a bit at this point, and I start to wonder, what would be the most likely to be remembered person? A mass murderer or a serial killer? Weird change of subject, but hey, we're on a roll. Let's go with it. I considered for a minute that maybe a mass murderer would be more shocking and likely to be remembered. After all, just about everybody knows about Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. Despite having killed directly by decree or starvation, Mao ended up to 45 million lives during the Great Leap Forward. But he still largely pales in comparison to the amount of stories, books, movies, and shows dedicated to serial killers. Most everyone knows who John Wayne Gacy, the Zodiac Killer, and Jeffrey Dahmer are. Well, we don't know who the Zodiac Killer is, but we know about him. There are countless efforts made to chronicleize their lives and the terror they inflicted upon the areas they hunted. So I felt a compelling argument could be made that serial killers, despite having far fewer victims than some mass murderers, are remembered longer and with more infamous gusto. Beyond the names Hitler, Stalin, and Mao, most people cannot name another mass murderer. As an example to consider, how many people know what Sandy Hook was? Now, how many people actually know the name of the guy who did it? His name was Adam Lanza, for those curious. It's not it's not to belittle the tragedy. It just seems that for a mass murderer to get remembered, they have to reach some absurd numbers. So I started thinking, if a serial killer is more likely to be remembered than a mass murderer, is there any chance that there's a socially acceptable serial killer? I mean, society seems to fawn attention to all of these people. What would it do with a socially acceptable serial killer? So I won't name the name, but most people are aware of a decently long-running show about a serial killer who targets other serial killers as the core premise to the show. The episodes lead up to and describe the various acts of this serial killer, and our hero hunts him down and takes him out of the world to scratch his itch, fulfilling his own serial killer fantasy. It's a pretty messed up concept, but hey, I'd say socially that is pretty close to an acceptable serial killer. I mean, he only targets other killers, So he isn't doing it constantly, and he is doing a public service, right? Serial killers can't kill anymore if they're taken out. I guess the inherent danger is that our hero might run out of targets and start to fantasize about finding easier prey. Maybe I've given the creator of that show an idea for the 10th season when the depth of material starts to dry up. Kidding, of course. I don't know what season it shows on. I've never watched it. So I got to thinking, what could be a more socially acceptable serial killer than that character? What could make for good TV and a good premise that doesn't flagrantly copy the other show? Fuck if I know. But hey, I got an idea to offer anyways. Pretend you've settled down to your chair and are relaxing after a long day at work. You decide you want to watch something a bit darker than normal. It was a hard day, and you want to see something hard to watch. But you want something that is going to give you a bit of satisfaction and leaving you feeling okay that you cheered for the bad guy. I think there's a place for the bad guy winning once in a while. It adds to the drama when it happens. It's just so unusual, right? Anyways, the hero of the show is sitting at his computer, typing a message to 34 male in the Phoenix area, not far from their hometown. He pretends to be a 13-year-old boy. Or girl if it makes you more comfortable. Perv. The older man offers to come visit the child. The hero provides an address to an industrial park, letting the would-be perp know they live nearby and can meet them there. So you've got an interesting premise so far. The victim drives to the location, bringing condoms, chocolates, and a teddy bear. The hero brings a taser. The hero inflicts mutilation, rape, and torture on the victim, before finally ending their lives. Now imagine the hero puts online a series of screenshots of the text conversation, puts up a recording of the act of vengeance upon the victim, and ultimately exposes the victim to be a child diddler. Imagine the fear that would-be diddlers might start to feel the next time they reach out to a would-be victim. The public at large doesn't have anything to fear. You're clearly targeting and taking out the truly lowest form of life. Are the diddlers talking to a ripe and ready 13-year-old, an FBI agent, or a would-be vigilante waiting to exact some vengeance upon the wicked? I think you've got a solid start to a series here. Now think, if the would-be diddlers get wise and stop grooming online, the vigilante still has a great trick up their sleeve. The sex offender registry. They can track down and hunt their chosen prey easily, filling episode after episode of vengeance inflicted upon one of society's least desired criminals. It's near truly a victimless crime. If anything, it's giving closure to countless victims that were assaulted by their abusers. As the news starts to break of a serial killer taking out diddlers. While the cops are honor-bound to investigate, I'm guessing they won't be putting in the usual measure good police work to find the hero. We could provide endless seasons of a show like this if written well, because unfortunately, there's a lot of diddlers out in the world. So I went to my wife and told her I have a great idea for a TV series. She's now suggesting I stay at the hospital for me. I guess while it might qualify as the most socially acceptable serial killer formula, putting it into words or on TV might not be for everyone. I promised my wife I'm not going to hurt her in her sleep. I should note, however, she made no promise back to me. I'm reconsidering my sleeping arrangements carefully these days. Stay safe, Kings. So here's a shorter, modified version of the story I just recapped. So the other day my wife wakes me up and asks if she needs to be afraid for her life when she's asleep. Tell her of course she doesn't need to be afraid for her life when she's asleep. She isn't running her mouth and I'm at peace. But seriously, that's an odd question. I start worrying that maybe that question is kind of like an accusation a cheater makes against their partner. Constantly asked if they were cheating when they themselves are the cheater. She went as far as to ask if she had to be worried I was going to stab her in her sleep. She was oddly pacific. I start to worry that maybe I'm living with a budding future serial killer, and she's weighing the options of the best time to overpower me. I start thinking of ways I can reassert my dominance in the relationship and stave off the inevitable stabbing. So I turn my ass towards her and let rip a large one, choking us both out. I don't think she was impressed, but I think I've given myself another year or two. Stay safe, Kings. If you like this content, like and subscribe. Thanks for listening.